From coast to coast and all points in between, this is the news so far. I am Vincent Moniz. Okay, it's been a heck of a week. We're going to talk about something that started sort of at the beginning of the week, and at the end I was hearing on social media that the Navajo Nation citizens were telling each other that they need to make sure that they have their tribal IDs and or papers, their certificate of Indian blood, because some of them were being wrongly deported, or there were stories about they could be, because of the 4 to 5 days that the new administration has taken hold and their flurry of executive orders. Well, let's dig into the topic at hand. It's the Trump administration's challenge to Indigenous American birthright citizenship. What's at stake for tribal nations and why this challenge is unlikely to succeed. Come on, let's go for a long cruise. Well, what's happening? The Trump administration is questioning whether certain groups of people born in the United States are automatically U.S. citizens. Specifically, they're targeting individuals born to parents who are not U.S. citizens, including those with indigenous ancestry, as well as people from Latin America. This challenge is part of a broader effort to limit birthright citizenship, which has been a cornerstone of American law and identity for over a century. As of today, I'm recording on January 25th, 2025, this challenge is still ongoing, with many experts predicting that it will ultimately fail in the courts. Trump's argument isn't that the amendment only applies to Indian country, but rather that the U.S. government's past violations of the Constitution, particularly regarding Native Americans, justify his own actions to limit birthright citizenship. However, this argument is unlikely to succeed, as the Constitution's guarantee to birthright citizenship is clear and unequivocal. The law. The 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution remains clear. All persons born or naturalized in the United States are subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. The Supreme Court has consistently upheld this interpretation, and the January 2025 court ruling reaffirms the longstanding legal precedent that birthright citizenship is a fundamental right guaranteed by the Constitution. Despite the administration's efforts to reinterpret the 14th Amendment, the law remains a powerful safeguard against attempts to deny citizenship to marginalized communities. So, marginalized. Us guys. Anyway, Trump's argument about the 14th Amendment is rooted in the idea that the U.S. government has already violated the Constitution in its treatment of Native Americans. However, opponents argue that the amendment's guarantee to birthright citizenship is clear and unequivocal, like I said, and that Trump's actions exceed presidential authority. Furthermore, and the Supreme Court has consistently held that the 14th Amendment's guarantee to birthright citizenship applies to all persons born in the U.S., regardless of their parents' immigration status. The history. The concept of birthright citizenship has been a cornerstone of American law and identity since the 14th Amendment was ratified in 1866. I know I'll be touching on things that I've kind of already talked about, maybe in a Shakespearean way. Old time, though. Anyway, the 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868. The amendment was enacted to ensure that former slaves were granted citizenship, but it also established a broader principle that anyone born on U.S. soil is a U.S. citizen. You're here, you're one of us. This principle has been consistently upheld by the courts, including in the landmark case of United States v. Wong Kim Ark, 1898. Despite the Trump administration's efforts to challenge this principle, the history and law are clear. Birthright citizenship is a fundamental right guaranteed by the Constitution. Trump's argument. Well, The administration's argument about the 14th Amendment is based on a flawed interpretation of the Constitution, like I was talking about. He claims that the U.S. government's past violations of the Constitution, particularly regarding Indigenous Americans, they justify his own actions to limit birthright citizenship. However, this argument ignores the long history of court decisions and laws that have established birthright citizenship as a fundamental right. And Trump's actions exceed presidential authority, and like I said, they're unlikely to succeed in the courts. And here's why. Despite the administration's efforts, this challenge is unlikely. I keep saying this. It's unlikely to succeed. The Supreme Court has consistently upheld birthright citizenship, and there is no indication that they'll reverse this precedent now. More. The administration's argument relies on a flawed interpretation of the 14th Amendment, which has been widely debunked by legal scholars. Furthermore, that word's starting to grow on me. Furthermore, the administration's challenge would require a significant overhaul of existing laws and policies, which is unlikely to happen. Here's what's at stake. If the Trump administration's challenge were to succeed, it could have far-reaching implications for marginalized communities. Roughly 250,000 children are born each year to parents who are not U.S. citizens. And denying them citizenship would create a permanent subclass of people. This would not only harm these individuals, but also undermine the fundamental principles of equality and justice enshrined in the Constitution. Potential impact. Imagine not being able to hunt, fish, or gather on ancestral lands because certain groups of people are no longer recognized as U.S. citizens. So, even though their people have been there for thousands and thousands of years, they are no longer able to do that. Let's say you're in a state like Idaho, and you're non-native, and then they say, hey, you, for whatever reason, you are no longer a citizen of America, and so in Idaho, you can't hunt, fish, or even go and get pinyon or any other berries or anything like that because you're no longer recognized as a U.S. citizen. Imagine communities not being able to govern themselves or make decisions about their own futures. This is what's at stake for Indigenous people and all marginalized people if the Trump administration's challenge were to succeed. Which nations would be affected? The answer is all. All Indigenous nations across the United States would be affected if the administration's challenge were to succeed. From the Navajo to the Cherokee, from the Ojibwe to the Oneida, all tribal nations would face significant challenges. Native people could lose their rights to cross the border, which for some, this is essential for their traditional way of life. The medicine line, I heard it called. Here's the impact on specific communities. In Minnesota, the Dakota communities, including the Medewakanton, the Wapaytuwan, Sissetuan, and Wakpekute, they would face significant challenges. They could lose their rights to hunt, fish, and gather on their ancestral lands, just like I was talking about. This is established by the Treaty of Traverse des Sioux and the Treaty of Mendota. The Thornthom Nation is located on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border and would face significant challenge in maintaining their cultural heritage. It's directly tied to the people that has nothing to do with the border. It was slammed on top of them. There's been lots of speculation, so I decided to do some myself and kind of be like, what's the motives? Why? What are the reasons that this challenge is even out there? Some people might wonder why the Trump administration is pushing this challenge. Is it voter suppression? Particularly in key states with significant populations that vote blue. Most of Indian country votes blue. Very small percentage are Trump supporters. Is it an attempt to undermine the inherent rights of communities to their ancestral lands and resources? That's been day one Indigenous nations, their lands and resources have always been looked at as something to devour since the first boats pulled up. I mean, maybe it's a strategic move to dismantle Indigenous self-governance. The potential benefits of increased governance, I heard a couple people talking that this could be amazing. Some people might argue that if the administration's challenge were to succeed, it could lead to increased self-governance for communities. Without being bound by U.S. citizenship, communities might be able to exercise greater control over their lands and resources. They might also be able to negotiate their own trade agreements and exercise self-governance. The utopia, if you will. Actual sovereignty, not limited sovereignty. But the risks, they outweigh the benefits. I mean, it's really important to remember that these potential benefits are highly speculative. And the risks and consequences of the administration's challenge far outweigh any potential advantages. It's really, really important to stay focused on protecting the rights of all Indigenous people living in the United States and other marginalized communities. I mean, rather than sitting around and saying, oh, this would be awesome, we could do this and that, start our own military. No, protect what we've got and people that need protecting. I mean, what can be done? First, it's essential to stay informed and engaged. It's why I've just started to make these rundowns and do some updates about stories. People need to learn more about their history and their rights as Indigenous citizens. They also need to support organizations that are fighting to protect the rights of all Indigenous people living in the United States. While these motives are speculative, it's essential to consider them, given Trump's track record on issues related to race, ethnicity, and voting rights. Remember, knowledge is power. So, if you'd like to learn more about the history of Native American citizenship and the ongoing struggles of tribal nations, I recommend checking out the National Congress of American Indians. Their website is incredible. And if you want to find resources and information on how to support tribal nations and advocate for Native American rights on the website of the Native American Rights Fund, you will find incredible amounts of information. And if you want to stay current on what's happening with respect to the people, policy, and politics of Indian country, well, there are an incredible amounts of media outlets. And, you can always come back here while we're at it. I do have a Cash App and would love to get my car up and running. Hey, that's all I have for now. Thanks for listening to the news so far. Join me again for more stories and breakdowns from the down, brown, and greasiest parts of Orion's arm. This program is produced by me, recording myself underneath a buffalo robe in my living room. The theme music does not exist because I'm afraid the ghost of Biggie Smalls will want to stick me like flypaper neighbor if I use his music. I am Vincent Moniz. Until next time, stay informed and engaged. We are all we got.